Hello, and welcome to myfinanceteacher.org. Let's have a quick look at Bitcoin. Yesterday, Bitcoin did well to break above the 50-day moving average. And it looks like today, with a small red candle, we are retesting that breakout. If over the next couple of days, Bitcoin manages to cling on to the top side of this 50-day moving average, that would increase the chances of a continued rally in Bitcoin. Seeing that Bollinger Bands are decreasing, which usually indicates that a more volatile period is coming. As I mentioned, if Bitcoin manages to stay above that 50-day moving average, that volatility will be likely to turn out to the upside. The ongoing cycle in Bitcoin is so far 31 days old. As you know, usually these last for a couple of months, meaning that there is still a lot of time left within this cycle to give us a nice potential for upside in Bitcoin. Looking at the 14-day RSI, the highest it's been so far within this cycle is just under 55, which is also pretty far from anything close to overbought zone, which also tells me that there is still quite a lot of potential within the ongoing cycle in Bitcoin. Before we continue, let me remind you guys to subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and click that bell notification. Thanks a lot. So that's the daily chart. Let's move on to the 4-hour chart, because the interesting thing on the 4-hour chart is it looks like Bitcoin is breaking out of this more or less a symmetrical triangle. A bit of a red candle over the last few hours. Looks like Bitcoin might retest this breakout over the next 1 or 2 days. And if retest is successful, if Bitcoin manages to stay above 10,700, then further upside will become more likely. The next resistance zones above the current price would be around $11,150. That's based on a couple of lows in August and a top somewhere in the middle of September. I think this resistance zone is going to be broken over the next week in Bitcoin. In that case, the next resistance zone would be based on this early September high, which is also a bit of a round number of $12,000. Looking at Bitcoin Optimism Index, we see that back in early September, Optimism Index did drop low enough to indicate the beginning of a new cycle. And since then, the highest that this index has reached is only just below 65. As you see, history shows us that most of the cycles stop when this index reaches above 70, even close to 80 or above. Meaning that the highest of 65 so far within this cycle is pretty far from a cycle top, and there is still a nice potential in Bitcoin over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Next, moving on to Fear and Greed Index. We see that currently we are at 48, and back in the middle of September, we've only reached as high as 52. Generally, it's a good idea to start trimming your positions when Fear and Greed Index reaches as high as 70 or higher. So with the recent high of only 52, the potential of this cycle is far from exhausted, and as I mentioned, it also indicates a further upside. On the downside, about a month ago in early September, we reached as low as 38 on this Fear and Greed Index. And although usually it's a good idea to get into some long positions when this Fear and Greed Index reaches 30 or below, the level of 38 a month ago is the lowest that we got for the beginning of the ongoing cycle and the end of the previous cycle. After all, at the very end of the previous cycle, the Fear and Greed Index did drop from above 80 all the way down to 38. So overall, further upside momentum is very likely until this Fear and Greed Index comes closer to 60 or even 70. Next, let's have a look at grayscale premiums on Bitcoin. As you see, one share of grayscale is now worth over 95,000 satoshis, and the share price at the close yesterday was at 1186. That gives you a premium on grayscale Bitcoins of over 14%. As I've mentioned in some of my recent videos, it is usually a good idea to get into long positions when this premium is below 15 or maybe even below 10%. And as I showed to the members at myfinanceteacher.org in early October, the premiums at that time were just around 8%. So the grayscale Bitcoin premiums are rising, optimism index is also likely to rise towards that 70 or even 80 red line. And with all of that higher optimism, I would expect a nice upside potential on Bitcoin, breaking the resistance at 11,150 and possibly up to 12,000. For more frequent and detailed updates on a range of markets, consider joining us at myfinanceteacher.org. You can do that by clicking this register button on the homepage. For now, I'd appreciate that if you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Lastly, I wish you a nice day and good luck in your trades.